So let's get right into it. Today's topic of discussion is the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program's Tech Draw. And so because Visto is super focused on helping tech workers, I wanted to cover this one. And for everyone joining, if you're not watching live, Visto is a free platform. We're helping tech workers and as well as other skilled workers through the Canadian Express Entry process. And so today's live video, again, will be on the Ontario Tech Draw. What I'm going to do is I'll spend about 10 minutes talking through it, the requirements, everything you need to know about it, and then I'll do a quick Q&A. If you're here live, I'll do a Q&A. If you're not here live, you're missing out on the Q&A, so make sure to sign up, www.visto.ai. Let's get right into it. Again, thank you to everybody who's tuning in live. So a quick overview. This is on the Ontario website, so I'm going to put the links right now actually in the chat so that you guys have this access to. You can actually go through it live with me. Andy, thanks for joining in live. Really appreciate it. And quick overview. So really quickly, if you don't know, PNPs basically give provinces the option of nominating individuals through Express Entry. You can actually go outside of Express Entry as well. So if you're not eligible for Express Entry, one thing you can do is consider applying not through Express Entry. The reason why we focus on it here at Visto is it's all online, it's more streamlined. Most applications are processed within 4 to 6 months, so for tech workers it tends to be the best way in. So if you're going through a PNP through Express Entry, there's generally two ways. Either a province will nominate you after you've submitted your Express Entry profile, or you just submit an application directly to the province, right? And this is part of a series I'm doing on the most promising PNPs for tech workers. I did one on Saskatchewan. I highly recommend checking out that blog post and video if you haven't seen it already. This one is for Ontario. I'm also going to do some other ones as well. So this is Ontario, more specifically through the Human Capital Priority Stream. That's kind of what the Tech Draw falls under. So you'll see here, Tech Draws. So the Ontario will be searching through the Express Entry pool. I'm going to go into more detail on that in just a second. And so you have to meet the criteria of the Human Capital Priority Stream. I'm going to go through that in detail. And the other thing is you have to have work experience in one of the targeted NOC codes. And I'm going to go over that list. You can see it down below here in just 1 second. But those are the two big parts, right? So here's how it works. The way you can get nominated through the Tech Draw is you have to have created an Express Entry profile and submitted it. And then every month, or I don't know how Ontario does it specifically on the back end, but what they do is they go through the pool of candidates in the Express Entry pool, and they nominate by sending a notification of interest, you can see here, an NOI, to people who meet these criteria that they think will be a good fit for Ontario. So in order to qualify, you have to have an Express Entry profile already submitted into the pool, and we'll see what you need in order to be a high target for them. So when you receive your NOI, you have 45 days then to submit your application to Ontario. We'll go through that in a little bit more detail. Let's go through the list of targeted NOC codes. So this will tell you pretty quickly whether you should even be watching the rest of this video, which is why I wanted to cover it at the beginning, because I don't want to waste people's times, right? So the Tech Draw targets certain NOC codes. You can see them right here. Software engineers and designers, so 2173, 2174, 2147, 2175, 2172, and 0213. Keep in mind, these are going to have to be like the primary NOC codes that you've created your Express Entry profile under. So if you don't have any work experience in those NOC codes, then this program probably isn't for you. Maybe you're just graduating, or maybe you're just starting your career. You don't have a year of experience within these NOC codes, but if you're currently working in them, you can definitely keep this in mind because you might become eligible for it down the road. They have a little blurb here on how we chose the eligible occupations, which basically means they went out, they talked to stakeholders, Ontario companies to figure out which ones were most in need. That's not as much as important for you as the simple question, does your NOC code fall under this list or not? Support for businesses, that doesn't really apply because you are not a business. Well, maybe some people with businesses are watching this, but that's the most important part for here is that you meet the list of targeted NOC codes. What we're going to do now is go through the human capital priority stream requirements. Just want to make sure. Oh, we got a few more people. Malek, thanks for joining. Joan, thanks for tuning in live. Really appreciate it. If you guys do have questions, you can put them in the chat and I will get to them at the end. So if you have questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to throw them in there. But while I'm in the flow of this presentation, I'm going to wait and then I'll go back and answer questions at the very end. So quick overview. The human capital priority stream is the stream that the tech draw falls under. So you have to meet these requirements as well as one of those NOC codes in order to be eligible. So we're going to go through them now. So first, as I mentioned, create a profile in the Express Entry system. So if you don't have that, they won't be able to find you, right, and send you a notification of interest. So number one is you have to have created a profile, submitted it to Express Entry. If you don't know how to do that, then go into our Facebook group. You'll see in the description I have a guide. There's a link to a guide, and it'll take you through the entire Express Entry process, what you have to do to create the profile, what you need to have done before then, and links to actually go and create the profile. So check that out, or ask me some questions after if you have them. Make sure you meet the mandatory requirements, so we're going to go over that in just a second. They don't outline them here. Understand the process. So keep in mind, when you get an NOI, notification of interest from Ontario, you then have 45 days to submit an application to them. It's on their Ontario e-filing portal, so it's a separate website. Takes about 3 hours to complete. I've actually done one before for a client. It's not super hard. It's actually very similar to Express Entry, the Express Entry invitation to apply application. And there's a lot of overlap. We're going to get to that in a second when we go through the document requirements. You do not have to complete the application in one session, so you can save your profile and come back. You can complete it yourself or have a representative complete it, so an immigration lawyer or consultant. The fee is a big one. It's $1,500 Canadian to apply, and you have to pay by credit card, Visa debit, MasterCard, and MasterCard debit. The reason why this is a point to highlight is because it almost doubles your PR application fees, right? So to apply under Express Entry, it's $1,040 plus the fees for everything else you need, right? Medical exam, IELTS exam, ECA, all that type of stuff. Probably comes to around $1,500, $2,000. If you're going to go through the tech draw, you're adding another $1,500 to that process, right? So if money is very tight, you might want to look for another option, especially like, for example, the Saskatchewan PNP was $350, so much less money than this one. But for PNPs, it really depends on which ones actually fit, which of the requirements you fit the best. So you may not have another choice. But I did want to highlight that it's quite a hefty fee for Ontario, $1,500. Have your supporting documents ready. We're going to go over the documents briefly, but you do want to definitely get a head start on some of these documents, because keep in mind you only have 45 days to apply once you're invited, right? I know that sounds like a lot, but when you have to get things like police checks and things like that, those are out of your control. Reference letters too can be out of your control. So don't trust in other people to get them done super quickly. So what they do here is they go through the details of Express Entry. I'm not going to go over these here because we have so much other content on Express Entry, especially in my guide. My guide pretty much covers all of this, but basically what this section is saying is you have to be eligible for and submit your Express Entry profile, right? So you have to take a language test with meeting the minimum requirements. You need the ECA if your degree is from outside of the country. You have to figure out what your primary NOC code is for your past work experience. And then you have to qualify either under the Federal Skilled Worker Program or the Canadian Experience class. And those are two pools within Express Entry. Again, all that stuff is in the group, in our guides, on our blog, so you can check that out if you need that help. So what we do, the long story short of this whole paragraph, is that they look through the Express Entry pool for people that meet their requirements, and then they send them a notification of interest. So they send you, you'll get a message through your Express Entry profile saying Ontario has chosen to nominate you and follow these instructions. So again, you will need to make sure you meet the mandatory requirements, 45 days. Some of this is repetitive, so I'm just going through it quickly. So here's the important part, mandatory requirements of the human capital priority stream. Again, the easy part of this is most of it overlaps almost word for word with Express Entry. So if you meet the federal skilled worker program requirements or the Canadian experience class, like you meet the work experience, right? It's even saying here's the federal skilled worker program requirements. So again, 1 year of full-time work, your experience must have been within the last 5 years in the same occupation as your NOC code that you selected in your Express Entry profile. Continuous, so there's been no breaks. It may be back-to-back jobs, but at least 1 year in the same NOC code. So that means it doesn't have to be 1 year of working one job with the same employer. You can have 1 year with two jobs, but there could be no time off, right? So for example, you can leave a job Friday, start a new job on Monday, and that's still continuous as long as you do it for 12 months. Canadian experience class, again, I talk about this a lot in our blog posts. So this stuff should be more review. And you can easily find it on our website, visto.ai. So I don't want to go into details here, but again, it's basically talking about the minimum work experience under the programs. So you'll see here for both programs, it's got to be at least a year totaling 1560 hours. Full-time, at least 30 hours of paid work in a week. Then there's a part-time equivalent, etc., etc. Again, we talk about all this. Minimum education requirements. So you must have a Canadian bachelor's, master's, PhD, or its equivalent in another country. So keep in mind, if you don't have the bachelor's degree, you don't meet the requirement for the human capital priority stream. You need the ECA if it was outside of Canada. And then again, it lists where you can get your ECA from. This is all in the guide as well that I have in our Facebook group. So I'm just going to zoom through this stuff here again because I don't want to put out too much repetitive stuff. Talks about the ECA and all of that kind of stuff. Language, similar to Express Entry, so CLB of 7 or higher. Again, you have to take the language test. This is all in the guide in our group, so I'm going to just fly through this. If you have any questions on that, feel free to ask me at the end, or again, just go in the Facebook group and look up the guide that walks you through the Express Entry process, because I have all these links basically and all this information. Settlement funds, this is again, same as Express Entry. So again, this link literally takes you to the Express Entry page. So it's the exact same requirements. If you're one person, you need 12,669, and then it goes up from there based on family. So this is all similar to Express Entry. So again, I'm just going to keep flying through it. Go back here, work experience, where was I? Language, settlement funds, intention to live in Ontario. So this is a big one, especially if you're applying from outside of the country, right? This is a little bit different. And so they list a few ways that you can show some ties to Ontario. So working or have worked in Ontario. The way I like to do these PNP programs is assume that people have never been in Canada before, right? So I'm going to ignore some of these. Getting job offers or applying, interviewing for jobs. So that can be a good one, right? If you can show proof that you're applying to a lot of jobs in Ontario, that's helpful. So keep records of all of that. Studying, I'm assuming you haven't studied in Ontario, but another backup plan could be to apply to study at a school in Ontario. Maybe you go get a master's degree, a post-grad degree, and that will give you a better chance at going down the Express Entry path in Ontario. Volunteering, can't really do that unless you're here. Leasing or owning property, assuming you don't because you don't live there. Visiting, that's another decent option, right? You can apply for a visitor, depending on what country you're from. You might have to apply for a visitor visa or an ETA, depends what citizenship you are. But if you plan a trip to Ontario, even go visit for a couple weeks, see Ontario, see Toronto, Ottawa, some of the little smaller towns, whatever it is, that's good proof of ties and intention that you're interested in moving here. Professional networks and affiliation, family ties, and personal relationships. So maybe friends, family, etc. All that will kind of help in your intention to moving to Ontario. Legal status. So if you're already in Canada, You have to prove it with, depending on what your permit is, if you're working here, studying, or just visiting. Federal skilled program, federal skilled worker program. So you must meet the requirements. So in order to be eligible, you need 67 points out of 100. Again, this is just a federal skilled worker program requirement. So through express entry. If you don't meet that requirement, you have bigger problems than worrying about the Ontario Tech Draw. Now, supporting documentation. I'm going to go through this really quickly because most of it overlaps with express entry, to be honest. So I will highlight the ones that you might want to kind of get on the top of your radar, but you can see the summary here. And I'm going to actually, you know what? I'm going to upload this link right into the Facebook chat so you guys have access to it as well. Zakaria, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. This is the list of documents. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I don't think it's worth anybody's time. You can browse through it quickly by yourself. But here it's pretty straightforward and almost identical to the express entry document requirements. So a photograph of yourself, passport, status document. So again, if you're in Canada, work permit, study permit, whatever it is. Education documents. So either your Canadian degree or your ECA, language test results. If you plan to work in Ontario, your job offer, work permit, LMIA, work experience reference letters. Again, this is all outlined in my guide for express entry, proof of compensation. If you're in a regulated occupation, you have to show that. If you're a tech worker, odds are your occupation is not regulated, so you're okay there. Self-employment, work contracts, optional. Documents, so proof of funds. Again, this is similar to express entry, so bank statements and things like that. Employment, resume, so that's again required for express entry. Family documents, so passport, status documents. I mean, you can see here, if you're at all familiar with express entry and those requirements, they're almost identical. So here we go again, cost to apply, $1,500 for the processing. Again, that's kind of up to you based on your financial position. But again, it's very situational. If this is the only PNP that might work for you, then it's probably worth it to pay the $1,500, in the long run, especially if you can line up a good job. $1,500 in the long run is not too much money. Refunds, we will only refund the fee if we find it's incomplete or you withdraw your application before they process it. So that's kind of case by case. You can use a representative to apply, so lawyer, immigration consultant. Make sure they're trustworthy. If you do need a lawyer to help with the application, send me a message because I have a few that are in my network that are reliable, and there's a lot out there that aren't. Submit the application, instructions. Yeah, so you're going to have to basically create an account, and similar to express entry, you have to create a profile and you submit it all online. It's pretty straightforward. I've gone through this process once for a client before, and it's pretty straightforward. Most importantly, again, you want to figure out if this program is the right fit for you and if you'll even be eligible for it. So the rest, I'll leave you to go through. Again, this is mostly just about changing information if you have to, how to apply, maintaining your express entry profile. That's obviously important. If you're not nominated, they'll send you an email and tell you what the next steps are. If you're not nominated, you probably won't hear much. But this stuff is all pretty straightforward. Again, very similar to express entry. I'll include this link in the chat as well. But that's pretty much it, right? The most important things to know are, so all those links are in the chat. So the 3 links, the first one is the link to the Tech Draw specific requirements. So mostly just the NOC codes that apply. The next link that I posted in the chat is the document requirements that you would need if you get your notification of interest. And the third link is the human capital priority stream requirements right here. And you're going to have to meet all those in order to get a notification of interest. So that's it. It's actually pretty straightforward, right? The most important piece is that you have the 2 most important parts. You have a valid express entry profile, and you fall under one of these NOC codes, right? So these are like the main kind of tech NOC codes, let's call them. And that's pretty much it for the program. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. The good thing about the document requirements is they're about 80 to 90% basically a total reflection of express entry. So it'll take you some time to collect them and upload them. But once you do, you'll have about 80 to 90% of the documents you'll need for your express entry application. So that's pretty good. It'll save you some time there. And that's pretty much it. That's it for the Ontario Nomination Tech Draw program. Again, shorter compared to some of the other PNPs. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. If anybody does have questions, then feel free to post them in the chat. If you're not already a part of Visto, if you're watching this after the fact, make sure to join us. It's totally free to join the platform at www.visto.ai. I put out other videos on, I'll be covering different PNP programs. I talk about ways to find jobs in Canada, whether you're here or not. I talk about how to study for the IELTS exam, tips and stuff like that, because I did write it a year and a half ago. So if you want to join, make sure to go to www.visto.ai. And if you're part of the community watching live, I'm going to get to the Q&A portion right now.